Julie first shared her story with us about 3 weeks ago. She has a very interesting story on something that many of us need to be aware of, and that is the possibility of vitamin D3 toxicity, a D3 overdose. But Julie has other interesting parts to her story as well. This is the full interview, and one of the key points that we'll cover that we haven't covered in other videos has to do with her inflammatory disease. She has Still's disease, and we go into a little bit more detail on that, as well as the D3 toxicity episode. Again, let's let her tell her story. So, Julie, thank you again for joining us for the full interview. You had some interesting experiences in terms of your own health, and they're experiences that I think a lot of people would profit from hearing about. Your story can help a lot of others. One of your key stories has to do with getting too much vitamin D.
Yes.
Would you tell us about it?
Yeah. I have an autoimmune disease, Still's disease, that I developed, or I was diagnosed with it back in 2017. And at that time, I became under the treatment of a rheumatologist. My primary care is involved in there. I've tried additional primary care doctors, hematologists, various different people trying to find the cause of that. And so in one of those experimentations, I was able to find a DO who was willing to do pretty broad scale blood tests for me to try and come up with causes. One of those that she did was on vitamin D. And the results from that test told her that I probably needed to add supplementation to vitamin D. And so she prescribed for me, amidst of a lot of different things she suggested that I do, increasing my vitamin D uptake to 5,000 or 50,000 IUs of vitamin D. Kind of left it at that, didn't give me any more advice. And I took it from there, and I started adding that over-the-counter supplement to my daily vitamins and medications that I take. And then since that time, I've gotten concerned about some of my other values that have been coming back on testing, in particular cholesterol, and being found to be a touch insulin resistant. And so I kind of started watching your videos and following you, and then had you take a look at those labs. And I think when you did, you were probably pretty shocked by my number. I came in extremely high, around the 178 mark, I think was the first number that we tested, and immediately called me and told me to stop taking vitamin D. So.
Yes, that's the crux of the story. There's a lot more detail in there. For folks that don't know that much about the area, vitamin D is, yes, you can call it a vitamin, but it actually functions as much as a hormone as a vitamin, and I'm sure you've already learned that. Up until recently, we didn't know how important vitamin D was. 100 years ago, it was like, okay, well, it prevents rickets, malformation of bones. But that was when people had way low vitamin D levels. Up to the past 5 to 20 years ago, we all thought that a level of 20 to 30 was good. But since then, a lot of research has shown that, you know what, it's not good. We need higher levels. Even most of the labs still have a 20 to 30 level as the appropriate level. Now, even organizations as conservative as Mayo have shown that that's probably a little bit too low. And they've also shown that vitamin D is safe. In fact, I did a review of an article in the Mayo Clinic proceedings a few weeks ago showing that vitamin D levels are safe at much higher levels, 50. Now, as you just mentioned, your level had gotten up to 178. Do you remember what your level was when you first had it measured?
To be honest, I don't. I could look that up while we're talking, but it was enough that she said I was probably feeling sluggish from that number being low. But I also had a very low hormone level at that same testing.
Yeah. Now, a little bit more detail about what happened. I've looked to see where you can get problems in terms of toxicity, and loss of kidney function has been shown as low as 109. Now, yours got up to 178. What was your most recent number?
We tested a couple weeks after that. She ordered a test for me and it came in at 128.
Yeah. And I asked you at that point, there is a little bit of decreased kidney function right now, but the vast majority of the time, unless that's something that happened before an acute vitamin D toxicity, usually that'll come back, and I think we both expect that and are looking forward to that improving over the next few weeks, especially already with a level down to 125. But let's go back in terms of the details. As I mentioned, when you see these levels, usually it's supplementation. Yes, you can get vitamin D from the sun, but I've never seen toxicity from getting it from the sun. Yes, you can get it from products, food products. I've never seen it from toxicity from food products. It's always been from supplementation. Sometimes people getting an injection, injections of 25,000, 35,000, or 50,000, and multiples of those. Or as you said, yours was oral. So do you want to describe a little bit about what happened with you, with the instructions, with the medication itself?
Yeah, so when I was checking out, again, she had mentioned that I wanted to find a higher strength over-the-counter supplement. So she had a high-grade, medical-grade supplements that she was selling, and I bought the 50,000 IU version. I took home her visit notes, and they just said vitamin D, 50,000 IU, and so I didn't know any different, and had self-regulated my vitamin D before then, knowing that it was good for a lot of different things, including Alzheimer's and, prevention and things like that. So I just was used to adjusting it. So put one every day in my vitamin little pill box, and I started taking one every day.
I got a personal story to share there. I take 5,000, and that's my usual go-to or starting supplementation for my patients as well. When as you get older and start having blood pressure problems like I have, you get on some medications that are twice a day. So you get these little pill boxes and separate the pills out twice a day. I went for a few months forgetting about twice a day, and I was putting vitamin D in there twice a day instead of once a day. And sure enough, about 16, 18 months ago, I had my level taken, and it had gotten up to 90, a little over 90. And I began to go back and look and think about it. I had done the same thing. I'd over supplemented, and it happens. That's one of the valuable points of your sharing today, helping people think a little bit more about that. We tend to think if it's a supplement, well, it's harmless. It's over the counter. You don't need a prescription. But not true with vitamin D. We need to be careful. It can cause kidney disease. It can cause other problems as well. So what are you doing now in terms of vitamin D? What are your next steps?
Well, I'm not taking it currently. I'm trying to get the values down into kind of an acceptable range. I think you had mentioned somewhere in the 80-90 was probably a reasonable range. So I've got a test scheduled later today. So I'll do another blood draw and validate kind of where I am today, and then readdress adding it back to my diet at a correct level, and then continue testing for that. I don't know how regularly it makes sense. Maybe you can help out with that, just to make sure that it's back into a normal level.
We can. Usually I would target 60 to 80. That gives you some safe margin there. And in addition, when you look at the science, it's, yes, you do show improvement over 30, the old level, the old recommended level. But I haven't seen anything yet that's reliable that would indicate any significant benefit over 90. So 60 to 80 is or actually even over 60. So 60 to 80 is a good, safe level. It's a level which shows improvements over the old levels, but it's a level that gives you a significant safety margin up to the 110s and above, which have been associated with kidney damage and other problems.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned Still's disease. I bet very few people have know what it is or have even heard about it. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
It's interesting. I had never heard of it, and it's actually a diagnosis of exclusion. So back in 2017, I was in extremely high stress period at work and home, and started having these very random symptoms come up. And I had a rash that appeared first on my chest and then would move around and come in different places. I developed large lumps of swelling on my wrists, and to the point I actually thought I'd broken my wrist and went and had it x-rayed. I had a strep throat, an extremely sore strep throat. That was one of the first signs. Fever of 104 to 105 from 5 to 7 every night, and then severe muscle weakness. And so these random things kept getting a little bit worse and a little bit worse, and to the point I'd been to the emergency room a couple of times, and they sent me home saying, you know, there's really nothing we can do for you. We can't find anything wrong with you. And finally, really was at wit's end. I was getting ready to go back to the emergency room again because of the fever. And a friend luckily had a concierge physician that she was willing to call on my behalf. And she called him and mentioned, you know, I really recommend you asking, you know, them to check your CRP levels. You know, you may want to take a look, whatever they can do to validate your inflammation levels, and some rheumatological type things. And so by the time I went in, they were really concerned about the fever values. So they admitted me and then started running what felt like an episode of House. I kind of ran through all the different tests that from everything from, you know, chikungunya to, you know, all the different brain diseases to gonorrhea and syphilis, just to see what potentially would hit home. And like I said, it luckily worked out that they found a bunch of the markers were met for Still's disease and referred me out to one of the nation's experts with Still's disease here in Dallas.
Oh, who's that?
His name's Dr. John Cush.
Very good.
And,
I don't know him.
Yep.
I will say this. Yes, it is a diagnosis of exclusion. And yes, it is very much associated with inflammation. You mentioned rheumatologists. It's very interesting. I know you and I first got started together because you were working with Charlene Dean. Charlene actually used to be in our office a couple of years ago when we were doing mostly a Bale-Deneen type of approach, heart attack and stroke prevention. Charlene knows, and I'm sure you do now as well, that inflammatory diseases increase the risk for heart attack and stroke as much as diabetes. Most people don't know that. They know about diabetes being a major increase in risk, but they don't know so much about the rheumatological diseases. One of the things that's very interesting is I have these conversations. I obviously meet with a lot of docs on a regular basis as I come in and consult with patients. And the whole concept of heart attack and stroke being related to inflammatory diseases is very easy for a rheumatologist or a dermatologist to get because of what we just talked about. They're used to dealing with subtler diseases, where basically our body's taking friendly fire. Our own immune system is doing what it's supposed to do, except it's maybe attacking some parts of our body that, rather than attacking something external, it's gotten confused in attacking part of our body. That's part of what causes that rash, for example, that you have, and dermatologists see and rheumatologists see. Speaking of that rash, what color was your rash?
It was actually red, external circle with white in the center.
So never saw any tan, yellow, orange kind of tints?
I did not,
Okay, you know that's for the docs and the guys that look at this, they tend to look at that, look for that with Still's disease.
Yeah, it was, they had to run a couple of biopsies to try and get in and confirm that that was a dermatological Still's side effect.
Very interesting. With the rheumatological diseases like Still's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, our body has found some part, with dermatitis, some part of our skin, with rheumatoid arthritis, some part of our joint tissue that it has mistakenly decided is, it needs to be attacked and dissolved. So immune cells come in, they release enzymes and other things to dissolve that part of our body. With heart attack and stroke, our immune system finds plaque within our artery wall. Same thing happens. It begins to send in immune cells. They begin releasing enzymes and other things to dissolve that plaque. Any other medical issues that you have in terms of your challenges, things you're dealing with right now?
Yeah, I think part of the concerning thing, and certainly something we've talked about, is that the medicine that I'm taking for Still's disease, which is a biologic, very expensive biologic, actually is increasing my LDL numbers, and it's a known side effect. So it's frustrating. I'll go and I'll talk to my rheumatologist and mention that I'm concerned about it, you know, given the cardiovascular side effects of that. And he said, you know, it's kind of one or the other. It's you know, we can either deal with the inflammation system problems that you're going to have with this medication, or we are going to have the heart issues. So I feel caught a little bit in between by those, and that's something I would imagine other people experience as well.
For those that are dealing with inflammatory diseases, yes, they do. What was the medication you were talking about?
I'm on a medicine called Actemra, ACTEMRA, sorry.
It's one of the biologicals. Yeah. It impacts those antibodies that are creating your friendly fire from your immune system. Now, one thing that I told you is that I'm a little bit less concerned. In fact, significantly less concerned about LDL alone than I am about insulin resistance. Do you remember that conversation?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because I've had plenty of patients with a thing called familial hypercholesterolemia, for example, with LDL levels 250, 350, 450, who still tended to do okay as long as they stayed out of this danger zone associated with insulin resistance. The problem is when our blood sugar levels go too high and our insulin is going too high, it tends to burn that intima, that slick lining of our artery walls. Brad and Amy at Bale-Deneen call it the tennis court. And that's probably the term that Charlene would have used with you. So as long as that tennis court or that intima or the lining of that artery wall is in good shape, even higher levels of LDL tend to not be able to get through. But it's when you start developing holes in that lining of the artery that you start getting into problems. Anything else?
You know, I think it's just finding out what the right, and I would imagine that you hear this from many people. It's finding out what are the right steps to, you know, bring yourself back into a healthy state so that your immune system can not only help protect your arteries, but also just protect your body in total. And so I know that's different for every patient and everything, but it's certainly something that keeps me awake a lot. So.
Well, you bring up a critical point. If there's one thing that frustrates me, and then I just hear it over and over again, it's, well, no, everybody's got to take vitamin K2. Everybody's got to have a vegan diet. No, everybody's got to have a low carb diet. No, everybody's got to do this. As you pointed out, everybody's different. Everybody has different components in our metabolism. And as you've shared, you've got some balancing act to do, just like many of us. Your balancing act has to do with insulin resistance on one hand, and the impact of the increasing LDL on the other. When we talked about insulin resistance, do you remember what some of the things that we talked about? What are your focus points in terms of that part of your balance, dealing with insulin resistance?
Well, for me, I know that we talked about adding berberine in, which hopefully can give me kind of a natural supplementation to try and watch that, but also just starting to manage sugars and cut those out of my diet and try and minimize certainly the carb count that I can, so I can try and minimize that converting to glucose. And those things combined will certainly hopefully create less of an environment where LDL is going to be a problem for me. So
it's always a juggling act, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. And it's I think one of your statements was probably one of my favorites, which is you can't supplement your way out of this and you can't medicate your way. And so it's really about changing my lifestyle and you know, trying to figure out how I can make my body really not need to attack itself.
That's a really good point. We've talked about the medications for you. We've talked about supplements, in one space getting way too far in one place with the vitamin D, but balancing that out. You've talked a little bit about managing carbs. Anything else on the lifestyle perspective?
You know, increasing activity. I work in an office, so I have a fairly sedentary lifestyle, and just kind of getting out and you know, keeping my body moving, which is going to create an environment that'll actually start hopefully moving those LDLs out of my system a little bit easier. So.
Well, this has been very, very helpful, Julie. I appreciate your willingness to share with others. Anything else to add?
Not at this time.
Thank you so much.